Donald Trump Jr. joins us live tonight. Don, thanks very much for coming on.
Good
do you think, you talk to a lot of Republicans in Washington, do you think they understand the threat of woke capitalism, the alliance between the activist left and big business that is shutting down speech?
You know, I think they're starting to get it. I think they're starting to see it. I mean, that's why I've tried to utilize my platform. I did an op-ed in Real Clear Politics the other day because I see it from so many real Americans, just guys that are Second Amendment accounts, people that follow me, like my politics, whatever it is, and they're reaching out to me when I made a big deal of this, saying, wow, it's happening to me too, but I have a platform to actually do something about it. There are guys, Kevin McCarthy's been pretty vocal about it, but the reality is that nothing has changed. I put up an Instagram post 2 weeks ago about the Smollett thing because, I had the gall to be a little bit cynical about the entire ridiculous situation that was laid out, and Instagram just deleted it. I sort of responded in my normal fashion, rather aggressively saying, what's wrong with this? Here's the problem, yada, yada. And I got inundated, Tucker. Hundreds of people sending me DMs. Don, my account was shut down because I tried liking one of your tweets, or I tried liking one of your father's Instagram posts that was like him and his grandchildren. Nothing even controversial. And time again, I've had to follow you, Don, 3 times in the last week because they keep unfollowing you. It's really sad, and it's happening. And the excuse that, well, it's spam-like behavior. No, spam-like behavior is not making Instagram unfollow people who want to follow my content and other conservatives.
So free speech doesn't mean anything if people can't hear you speak. And this alliance between the activist left and big corporations is preventing people from being heard. So it is, in effect, an attack on free speech. The media
100%.
benefits from our freedom of speech. They are the prime beneficiaries of the First Amendment, and yet they don't even cover it. And places like CNN actually encourage companies to deplatform voices they don't think should be heard. Why is the press standing by as the First Amendment erodes?
Well, because, again, I think the majority of the press are now left-wing activists. They are on the side of that. They are not on the side that is being stymied. They're not on the side that is being oppressed. Guys like me, again, I can do this because I have a big platform. I have a big soapbox. I can get it out there. But some of the little guys, they can't. They don't have that ability. They just end up taking it. And that's what's happened. You've never seen someone on the left say, it's weird, Don. All of a sudden, I'm following Fox News. I was never following that. Like many conservatives are complaining to me and saying that all of a sudden they're following these crazy left-wing accounts that they never signed up for. This is happening. It's a one-way, systematic attack on free speech. And to me, it reads like it's a trial run for 2020. How are we going to do it? I'm not saying that every account is suppressed, but you do it enough. You take off X% of the top. You cut the message in half. You get rid of some of the viral nature of what my father, frankly, did very well in 2016. He played monkey in the middle with the media and what they tried to do with messaging. He went right to his people. He went right to the people with his message. He didn't allow them to manipulate it. He went right over them. I think, to me, it reads as though they're trying to figure out how to minimize that ability again and let the media, which again, 93, 94% left-wing activists at this point, and let them drive that narrative. Make sure that that is the only thing that regular, hard-working Americans see. And we got to call it out. We have to hit it aggressively.
I mean, I'm a little surprised that the Republican Congress has sat back. Well, for the 2 years they controlled the House, they still control the Senate, and let this happen. Is there a reason to have Mitch McConnell as Senate Majority Leader? Like, what is the point of having a Republican Senate if they can't stand up for free speech, especially when their own voters are being targeted?
Well, listen, I hope that this creates the platform for them to sort of jump on board to get it. Like I said, if it's me and I'm seeing literally hundreds of people, those are just the people who actually saw that post and are willing to take the time to reach out and send screenshots. Imagine how many other people it's actually happening to. Imagine how many don't even realize that it's happening. So, I think the Republicans, a lot of these companies are getting a lot of benefits from the government, from the internet, from all these things. It doesn't seem like it'd be fair to have a one-sided platform, and you saw it. I mean, you covered it in the opening segment, what's going on with PayPal. I mean, they're not even hiding it anymore. They're not even pretending anymore. It's just become the norm. If Donald Trump has shown conservatives one thing, it's that you don't just have to take the loss when the other side wants you to. You can actually fight back. you can fight back and win. I think we have to take, that message to heart. I think we have to start pushing back, and I think we have to start pushing back hard. If we don't, we'll never get the chance again, Tucker.
And there's still Republicans, elected Republicans, who will tell you, oh, it's just the free market at work. No, it's not. It's fascism. And if you don't
100% fascism. That's not the free market, especially.
No, it's not the free market. It's ridiculous. So Michael Cohen set to testify before the House Oversight Committee tomorrow. You haven't heard his testimony. Obviously, you've read stories about what he may say or not. What's your take on it from what you know?
Honestly, my take is, I have my father. I know he's in Vietnam right now trying to negotiate nuclear peace settlement with North Korea after 60 years of failed attempts trying to end the war, trying to end nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula. You have finally a president who's willing to do it. Finally a guy who's actually got a meeting with the other side. And for the Democrats to try to counter-program that kind of progress, to try to perhaps somehow distract him with this nonsense by, a convicted felon who's been lying to those same committees, it just goes to show you how much those Democrats really disdain Trump, but also America. I mean, who wants to try to stymie that process? Who doesn't want peace in the Korean Peninsula? Who doesn't want to end nuclear proliferation in a dictatorial state? I mean, who doesn't want that, Tucker? It's crazy, but they show you that they really hate Trump much more than they like America, because I get nothing from counter-programming those kind of peace talks with this nonsense that's been proven with a convicted felon, other than they just want Trump to fail, even if it means America fails. And that's a really sad state of affairs, Tucker.
Donald Trump Jr., thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
There are some negative things that you could say about Donald Trump. What's interesting is that the left almost never says them. Instead, they spend a lot of time telling you how Trump is a fascist who poses an imminent and terrifying threat to our constitutional order. Sounds pretty scary. Is it true? Well, consider the major freedoms protected by our Bill of Rights, the document that makes America distinct from all other countries. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, the right to keep and bear arms, due process under the law. Now, take a close look at today's news. Who exactly is threatening those freedoms? Is it Donald Trump? Whatever his faults, it is not Donald Trump. It is the left. And they are doing it more aggressively than they ever have before. As usual, their critique of Trump is pure projection. If you want to know what the left is actually doing, listen to the way they attack other people. Start with a foundational freedom, speech. If they can tell you what to say, you are not free. There is nothing they can't make you do. That's where the founders put it first. It's the freedom that comes before all others. The left has spent decades trying to weaken the First Amendment. They've done it in the sneakiest way possible by creating phony hate speech exemptions out of thin air. So far, the courts have not accepted this idea, the idea that you can limit speech simply because someone else doesn't like it. So the left has a new plan now. They've allied with big corporations to make it impossible for people who say the wrong things to make a living in this country. You may have heard of a company called PayPal. It's an online payment platform, the biggest. If you want to make money online, and many people do, PayPal is essential. In a recent interview with the Wall Street Journal, the CEO of PayPal, Dan Schulman, explained that diversity and inclusion are his company's top values. But of course he doesn't mean it. He means the opposite. Like most on the left, what Schulman actually wants is utter conformity, a world where only approved opinions are allowed. Last year, PayPal banned Alex Jones from using its platform for saying things they didn't like. They've also banned anti-Muslim activist Laura Loomer, the publication VDare, and a number of other people and organizations whose speech they believe should be silenced. Schulman admitted that his company takes guidance on who to ban from the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's an entirely fraudulent organization that works as an arm of the Democratic National Committee. According to Schulman, quote, the line between free speech and hate, nobody teaches it to you in college. Nobody defined it in the law. Well, that's ridiculous. It is very much defined in the law and has been for 50 years. In 1969, the Supreme Court conclusively decided that hate speech does not exist. But it doesn't matter to Schulman or any of his allies on the left. To them, the First Amendment is merely a legal obstacle. It's something to subvert rather than celebrate. And PayPal is just one small example of this. Across the country, the left is working to crush any organization that stands in the way of its power. In New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo is trying to shut down the NRA. Why? For the crime of disagreeing with his agenda. Cuomo is harassing financial companies that do business with the group, and it's working. The media celebrate this, just as they celebrate the endless attacks on Fox News. They're entire nonprofits whose only purpose is to close the network you are now watching. They are tireless and they are well-funded. If they someday succeed, you won't hear a word from the left about censorship. No, they'll celebrate an entire news media with one perspective. That's their goal. Total conformity, which is the same thing as obedience. To achieve that, they're working to nullify the Second Amendment as well. Almost every Democrat now running for president would like to disarm the public, and they say that out loud.
Why do you need assault weapons for hunting? Why can't you have universal background checks?
So much corruption, so much greed. We can't actually pass common sense gun reform in this country, not because the American people aren't behind it, because they are, but because the NRA is more worried about gun sales than they are about the well-being of our kids.
We need to take on the NRA, expand background checks, end the gun show loophole.
The United States Congress needs to have the backbone and courage to pass smart gun safety laws.
The NRA, smart gun safety laws, common sense gun reform, the gun show loophole. Don't believe a word. Those are just talking points. They don't mean any of it. They plan to take your guns away. They have to. How else can they make the population obey? Once you understand that their goal is total control, their policies begin to make sense. To a literal person, for example, the Green New Deal sounds like it has something to do with the environment. It's green, after all. Of course, if you really cared about the environment, the quality of air and water, you would push China to stop polluting. China is the world's biggest polluter by far. But the Green New Deal doesn't even mention China. Instead, it's all about controlling you, the job you have, the house you live in, the vehicle you drive. Today, those are choices that you get to make. Under the Green New Deal, the Democratic Party would make them for you. That's why so many of their candidates have endorsed the Green New Deal.
You'll hear things like the Green New Deal. You'll hear things like Medicare for all. You'll hear things like whether it's taxes. You'll hear things.
Right.
At what point do you say, that's our North Star, but we have to be realists?
There's no question we have to be practical. But being practical also recognizes that climate change is an existential threat to us as human beings.
Can we afford it?
Of course we can afford it.
$2.5, $3 trillion a year for Medicare for all by some studies.
It's not about a cost. It's about an investment.
Medicare for all, another power grab, a total federal takeover of the healthcare sector. That means more power for them. Just the other day, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez speculated that it may no longer be right to have children, kids. Today, she considers that a debatable question, just asking. But in 20 years, it may be settled theology. One morning, you'll wake up and Commissar Ocasio-Cortez will be proposing control over who is allowed to have children and when. Don't believe it? Well, the same thing is happening with reparations. It moved fast. 20 years ago, seizing people's possessions and giving them away to atone for the sins of those who died more than a century ago, that was considered a fringe position. Nobody said that out loud who wanted to get elected. Today, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Julian Castro, they have all said they're for it. At this pace, we'll be knocking down statues of Barack Obama someday soon for the crime of opposing reparations. This all sound a little paranoid? Okay, do this. Find a big city newspaper from just 10 years ago. Read the whole thing. Then compare it to this morning's Washington Post. How far has the left moved in just a decade? A long way. And the pace is quickening. Fascism? Yep, it's a threat, and it's not coming from the White House.